Michael Ruggier can tell a lot more, which has to do with disruptive innovation. He's been with Shell International for 24 years. And if I understood his complex introduction, he had to deal with many times with introducing new technologies or developing new technologies for Shell. And he's taking his experience right now in his consultancy company, GameChanger Technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Ruggier.
Thank you. Okay, as you said, I'm going to focus very much on the disruptive innovation. And I'm going to explain why we need it, how you can implement it in your organizations. And I want you to then hopefully help you to go beyond conventional thinking. And finally, I will end up with a number of specific examples where I personally have found the ideas and turned them into reality. So hopefully show you that disruptive innovation does pay. Firstly, I'm going to really tell you now today how to raise hell and change the world. And it really is that simple. I think almost anyone can and should do it. I think most of you are aware of the world's acute challenges at the moment. I know there was COP in Paris just recently and making awareness, but what are people actually doing about it? We all probably have heard the figures. You know, in this slide, as you can see, it's just for 2030. It's not a long way off, and we think we'll need 50% more energy. And we'll need 40% more water and 35% more food. So we've got to ask, what are people doing about it? We can talk, we can save a little here and there, become a bit more efficient. But for example, food at the moment, we all know it's at an absolute knife edge. There's a drought somewhere or a flood in India, and it affects the food price of that product on the other side of the world. And there's, to me, in these areas, which are so key, there have been no radical innovations that can sort of get us out of, okay, we saw the word, or get us out of the mess that we're in at the moment. I think we're complacent, just thinking the solutions will pop up and we'll have them. Maybe we've had that in the past from the Industrial Revolution, the Internet, etc. But where are those sort of radical innovations that we need coming from? I personally haven't seen any in the last decade, 2 decades, even say 3 decades in this area. I love this quote. It's from Buckminster Fuller. In fact, one of the inventors I'm working with was actually trained and coached by Buckminster Fuller himself and really set him targets, and I'll go into some of those technologies a little later. But if I quote what he said, "The fastest way to change something is not to fight it, but to design a new way of doing things that makes the old way obsolete." I think that says it all. You know, just come up with something radically new. And I'll give some examples, and you've actually heard quite a lot today anyway, and I'll refer back to them. So I think you know the innovation challenge, or just generally, you're designing things, incremental innovation. Every year it gets that bit better and improves. Like you can see from the original camera, black and white, took a long time, to the latest, you know, single lens reflex camera. But then, as we all know from our smartphones and all that, digital technology and photos just, you know, took over completely. And I don't need to explain what the next photo is. I'm sure you all realize. Yes, it's a Kodak plant, which was probably only built maybe 5 or 10 years before it was blown up. The big point to notice here, going back the slide, is you have to be that little brave and courageous and take that step and spend money and time on a technology before you're not going to suddenly get returns. It's going to be later down the road. And the worst part of it is, in a way, Kodak, I believe, had one of the first digital photographies and had that expertise. As in the bottom left-hand corner, it says it may have weighed 8 pounds, took 23 seconds to take a picture, and was 0.01 megapixels and stored on a cassette. But they had it, and I believe in the boardroom, management decided, oh, let's not work on that, let's keep doing what we traditionally do, and we all know what's happened. So I'm just saying, you need to step back a bit. You need to, you know, have a bit of faith and trust and do that to get that reward. And if you don't, you could potentially and very likely be out of business. Just going through the different ones, I don't want to get all bogged down in, you know, the words, the terminology, but you've got sustaining, incremental, the next generation, which is new products. But then there's a breakthrough, the transformational innovation or disruptive. I personally think, really, innovation, when you use that word, you should be talking about that. Incremental innovation should happen anyway. It's like you've got to have sales to be profitable. You've got to move with the times anyway, as even on the camera example I gave at the beginning. So innovation should be really being courageous, doing something more radical. But that's just where I'm going to focus on at the moment. But you can see the trends are certainly going that way, everywhere you look. This is a slide you can see 60% at the moment is spent generally of R&D spend, the allocation on innovation, on the sort of incremental renewable innovations, with just under 30% on new substantial innovations and just over 10% on breakthrough radical innovations. Obviously, it depends industry by industry. To me, if you're in something making train carriages and the Chinese are undercutting you by 50%, all your R&D should be on the radical innovations, because unless you come up with something breakthrough, you're going to be out of business pretty quickly. But at least the trend is looking that way. In 10 years, it's estimated that incremental will come down to just over 40%, new substantial innovations up to just over 30% from about 28%, and breakthrough innovations going just over 10% to just over 20%, so almost doubling, and that seems to be the trend over the next 10 years. So it's not a lot of time to really change where you spend your R&D budgets and what sort of innovation you as an organization actually spend your time and resources on. This other slide, sorry, you can't quite read the figures, but it shows a lot of companies were looked at, and you spend your money, the chances are, you're above average company-wise. And this is my favorite slide, really. You can see birds born in a cage think flying is an illness. I think, you could just think about that. Think about you in your current job, in your role, and you watch everyone around you in the organization. Are you sort of following them? Are you all like sheep or whatever? And, almost when you go break yourself out, are you the one who's sort of looked at as if you're the crazy one? So anyway, I love that quote. So that's sort of the need, I think, and why we go for radical innovation. Now I'm going to focus very much on a process. I was with, as you heard, with Shell GameChanger for 7.5 years, where they used a model which was developed 20 years ago by Gary Hamel back in 1996. I think it absolutely worked. I firmly believe it. That's why I've now formed my own company doing exactly the same, the methodology, the methods, but just applying it more for the alternatives, the alternative energies and that sort of area, the humanitarian projects. But I think each one of you could actually take this away with you after today's session and actually start implementing that model. The amount of money and whatever resources you allocate depends on the size you are or whatever, but I believe you can take it away with you and start implementing it. This is where you can see the gray curve. Once you've spent money, R&D on a particular product, there's only so much you can do. You can keep improving it incrementally. Like a smartphone can only get so small or whatever, and you just keep spending it. Whereas you could go for a completely different product and then have a different jump and take it to a complete different level. I think the great example we saw this morning was with the America's Cup. So you could have been a company, for example, looking at the yachts, and you could see you got that extra slight incremental increase in speed, which really mattered at that time. You could be putting different coatings on the hull of your boat to reduce the resistance and focusing on that. But then somebody had the bright idea, let's just get out of the water completely and almost turn the boats into aircraft with just 4 points of contact and basically planing. And that doubled the speed, as we saw. So do you see, it's think out of the box, do things differently. And you can just leave all the competitors, everyone doing their little incremental innovations. Just come up with that radical new way and work on that, perfect that, and then come up with the next radical innovation. So in that example, it was irrelevant, the friction of the hull with the water. So often the problems and the challenges you now face, you can just sort of come up with something which makes those problems and challenges absolutely irrelevant. And what's interesting here, and with this is going back with the Shell, so I'll just focus a bit on that. There were only about 10 individuals and 10 of us in Shell GameChanger. That's covering the world globally, upstream, downstream. But what's really amazing is from what we delivered, we basically were the funnel that fed the funnel. We fed into the R&D department or started joint ventures. But what 40% of what Shell research spent globally came from Shell GameChanger. So it's quite remarkable if you think about it. From just 10 individuals, they weren't the same ones, obviously, you generally change every 4 years, but from just sort of 10 individuals, just being able to be given space and allowed to just to be free and just jump on a plane and go somewhere and do workshops, you came up with enough ideas that 40% of what Shell R&D spent their time on was what came from them, which is the radical stuff, which probably is one of the reasons, I guess, why Shell is probably the most innovative company in the energy industry, in that oil and gas. So it just shows you why I think it pays. Because could you imagine if R&D just spent keep researching the old stuff? So how it works. It's a very simple and real-time innovation process. It happens right now, in a way. And it's run by a small, dedicated team. As I said, there were 5 of us, I think 5 in the Netherlands, 5 in Houston in the States. So a very small team, but it was very crucial to invest in people and their ideas. It's not taking the ideas, trying to do it yourself. You know, if you're funding and supporting someone and they don't want to run with it anymore, then you just drop it. But it's very much you're helping them, supporting them, financing them. And it's stimulating, capturing, nurturing, and maturing those ideas. And I'll show you how we sort of did that. And it's very much on the early stage. It's proving the concept. What that means is the ideas have to be that radical or novel or whatever that you actually need time and effort to prove it. You know, sometimes you've got ideas and you think, yeah, that looks a great idea, well, just do it. You don't need to prove it. It might not work commercially or whatever, but the idea's there. So it was really to prove, I suppose it's generally technical, but it's also business model. You can have a completely different model, and we would test those. We didn't have that many on that side, but it's certainly, the scope is wide. And we also did portfolio management, reviewed them twice a month, all the projects, filtered out the ones that you didn't want or you didn't feel were the highest priority, and then put extra effort into the ones which were higher priority. And it's also key, even though we focused on the proof of concept, because unless you've got that right, there's nowhere it can go, but we also had to always look at business take-up, forming JVs, joint ventures, and where it could go. You had to have an end user who would be keen to take it up should it work. You're not just proving ideas for the sake of it. And this is the system, this is the procedure. Oh, sorry, there's the slides. This is the procedure. It's basically this slide and a second one, and that is it. So I'm going to leave you with the slides, so you can take that and sort of follow it, adapt it to your own organization. And it's not like it comes with a big manual and a book and procedures. This is really it. People can come to you with ideas. It can be over a coffee, anywhere. You needed just 2 game changers to be there for the idea. And if you liked it, and the criteria is the next slide, then if it was internal, you could fund it straight away, $15,000, $20,000. You can give them a time writing code straight away, so they could go to a conference, build something in their garage, or do whatever. Literally immediately. You'd say yes, you'd generally say go for a coffee. Game changers would decide, yes, you've got the money, go for it, we support it. Or we may tell them, focus on this, or do that, or this is the shortest route to failure. So there's a few key principles that we must follow. We tell them what to work on. It might be different to what they're proposing. If it's a third party, then it still has to follow the process, but we don't give money to them. Then for the next phase, and we generally give that money internally so they've got time and effort and can justify to their boss why they're spending money, and it's covered for by ourselves, to just put a plan together. And that's a presentation, but it can be very rough, and roughly how much money they need for the next phase. And we call that extended panel. At an extended panel, we need just at least 3 game changers, and we don't normally need much more because that's just waste of resources. So 3 game changers, and we do there at that meeting take experts in that field from the group, only maybe 1 or 2. And we also have just a few, not everyone, but just a few potential end users who could potentially use that product if it was available. So at least we know there is a market, and sometimes it changes. Sometimes somebody's got an idea for one particular discipline, discipline or area, but it can change. But we do, at that stage, include people who, the end user or customer. And that improves the take-up considerably. It happens quickly because you've got the end users involved right at the beginning. And the few reasons why it works, we think, is energized proponents. That's the people who have the ideas. They're the ones who are passionate. They're the ones who are energized and will make it happen. It's peer challenge. We're all at the same level. Even if in GameChanger you've got people of different grades, and if we had sort of our line manager there at the meeting, he would give his opinion last, so no one's influenced by that. But you're all on the same level, and everyone's voice has the same weight. And we had to always reach consensus. It wasn't a vote system or anything. We had to agree amongst ourselves how to go forward. Full-time staff, well, that's absolutely key, because if not, you'll be involved in other operational issues or whatever, and then your mind is completely different. You can't sort of do one and not the other. So it's very important, the full-time staff. As I said, the real-time decisions we make it then, it's quick, simple, immediate, and very transparent and open. We would produce the minutes. People know exactly why we fund it, why we don't, and it's there for everyone to see. And this is just the second and final stage of the process. This is really it. It's the criteria. Obviously, the first one is potential value. It has to have value, and it has to be significant. Me personally, I wouldn't ever go for an idea and support that if it was like 10, 20, 30% improvement in what the current system is. It would have to be at least 10 times, 20 times, or 30 times better than anything that we're doing at the moment. And then on the novelty, it must be unique. That's probably the key. Very different, novel. No one's doing it at the moment. So you just sort of play in that white space. That's why I actually think it's easy. You can't go wrong. Even if it's half as good as you thought it would be, you're still doing damn well, 15 times better than anything else. But actually, from what I've learned from my experience, even though people come with stretch targets and what it can do, thinking back, we've always actually even exceeded those stretch targets. So even if you think it's 10 times better than traditional, often it ends up at 30 times better. I think it's always even better because people downplay it. So that's the novelty. The doable plan, that's very much the people. It's a people process. Do you like them? And I think we heard earlier with Gus previously, I think it was intuition. Like when I judge the projects, it's, I use intuition. I don't do spreadsheets. I don't do figures. I don't do analysis. That's not me. And it kind of gut, you just know, does it work? It's a yes or a no. To me, it's just black and white. And touch wood, I've never been wrong. Anything I've funded and supported, it's always actually turned out. And other ones I thought, even on the panels, we shouldn't really fund it. Don't support it. If it goes ahead, it often fizzles out or dies. So that's sort of the doable plan, and they must also understand the GameChanger process. At any stage you can just stop funding, and they're on their own, and that's fine. And why your organization? That's probably the key one and the hardest one to answer. Is it relevant to your business? Is somebody else better doing it than yourself? Are others involved? We normally would only get involved if no one else would get involved. Because as you probably know, very few people seem to, for some reason, I don't know, don't like to fund this disruptive, revolutionary innovation, or think it's too risky, or 101 reasons not to fund it. So normally, and these people don't get funding, and that's where we come in. And I personally believe all the ideas are out there. Whatever challenge, whatever you want to solve, they're out there. You just need to find those people, support them, help them, because those people very rarely get funding and chance and support to turn their ideas into reality. So basically, GameChanger is based on bringing Silicon Valley inside. So in a big organization, just get a bunch of, call them renegades, radicals, or whatever, give them some money, just let them get on with it. Everyone in the team will do different ways. Ones will do workshop, others will gallivant around the world, some, whatever, but just let them get on with it. And it's a bit like how Silicon Valley works, and let people fail and learn from it, and just really learn just by doing it. And it's the shortest route to failure. If by that we direct them, if it's going to, if there's anything which will cause it to fail, let people focus on that and direct that energy into that. Not just, for example, if it's a tool to go downhole, don't try and focus efforts on putting the tool down hole. You know that you can probably solve that, or further down the road. But what's the key essence? What's really the proof of concept here? And focus on that. And that's the bit which, needs most effort, or once you've cracked that, then the chances are is that it'll work. So put the efforts into that. And on that subject, generally 1 out of 10 internally passed and graduated. In other words, went to a home and we proved the concept. But the interesting part of it is that 90% of our budget went on that 1 out of 10. So it's not like 1 out of 10 succeeds and that means only 10% of your money's used. No, because the others you kill quickly. You spend the minimum you can. If it's going to die, kill it quickly, squash it. You don't want a long, slow, lingering death. And as I said, learn by doing. Just do it. I don't like all this theory or whatever. It's often easier. Just do it. Just buy the materials and just do it. And lots of short steps. That's again why I find this approach is not risky, because you put very little money in, you prove it. When it's worked, you put a bit more in to prove something else. So it's really almost pittance you're putting in with the size of the prize like that, and you're just putting in small amounts. And only when you've really proved the concept, then you really need to put in the big bucks and the money. And it's very easy to come to win-win contracts with the people. One, they generally really need or want the money, and I always make it a win-win. But it's so easy to come to a win-win because everything's open to you. You generally gain by implementing the technology and getting value from that, and they get value from their technology. This is just showing on the time scales. We also help to make things happen quickly. You can see even if broadband, we just had a session, it doesn't seem the slides worked very well. Okay, but even that you can see took, I think it was about 15 years to actually get 50% commercial. And in the exploration and production oil, it's about 20 to 30 years before it's actually got out there. So it's very slow. So this sort of process certainly does speed that up as well. So this is just a small fraction of the projects I've taken from idea through to sort of proof of concept. And I wanted to show, this is in 6 years, but it's probably 3-4 times this. And all just from the initial idea with small money. It's a very diverse portfolio and projects. And why I'm saying that is even if just one of them succeeds, as I can mention many examples, once every 2 to 3 years, the chances are that's paid for the funding of GameChanger for the last 20 years. It's that big and so much to gain. One project, I found 2 people at the University of Aberdeen doing algorithms and saw where we could apply it to our industry. They grew to 27 people. I got them to sign contracts in 3 different continents, and their product could add 2 to 3% of global production to Shell. So what's that worth? And I think they were then floated on the stock market for 150 million, and their shares really shot up. So it just shows what you can do. And that was, I think, $200,000 to $300,000 in all, is what I spent. And all that was done within 2 years. And the best game changers are when you can take proven technologies out with your own industry, which have been proven, and you adapt them into yours. So, it really reduces the time lag. Now I will focus on some specific ideas a bit more. Now, if I ever had a crazy idea, this was it. I'm sure you all know from TED, I think it was mentioned at one of the earliest speeches, and I thought instead of knitting woolen jumpers when you get holes in and doing our efficiencies there, an organization like that, let's go for radical ideas, something which could actually make a difference to our planet. And luckily they allowed our idea, which was ice from the sky, which was generally, if you take, say, a cubic meter of water on the Earth and you take it up high, you see the ice forming on the outside of the window on the airplane. If you could do that, it's effectively global cooling because you're taking heat from here and it's radiating out there. Bring that ice back down to Earth. Using that ice, for example, in the Gulf, the Gulf there for air conditioning or for whatever, that, just in 1 cubic meter, 1 ton, to give you some figures, it's equivalent to having your kettle on 1 kilowatt for, can anyone guess for how long? The energy you get from that, just to melt the ice? Well, it's about 2.3 days. So that's enough to heat 2 huge houses air condition 2 huge houses in Houston, or it can freeze fish if you're in the middle of nowhere. But I'll show you a quick video on it. But the main story I wanted to tell you here is just pushing it. I'm not saying this is it. It's radical, but going for ideas like that can actually potentially make a big difference to our world. So I'll show you a video, and just to let you know, it costs nothing. I treated Heineken, the beer company, so it was great to join up with them, to a few meals when we planned a workshop. They paid for the workshop. So apart from our time to turn up at the workshop, there was very little time and effort into it. And hopefully one day something like this could take off. But it's really showing what you can do with crazy ideas. And you never know, they may take off. Oh, excuse the pun. So if we see a bit of quick video.
The idea of ice in the sky is that you go up into the sky, nearby a plane or so, the temperature goes down very quickly. What you do with ice in the sky is that you use a balloon, it's a helium balloon, and the balloon has a container with it. There's water, water cools down, and in the end it freezes. When you bring it down in a careful way, you can use the ice for cooling and for all kinds of cooling purposes.
Paul, could you do the honor of giving Marcel the award, the TEDx Amsterdam award?
It was a great honor to be receiving the TEDx 2012 award. It was a fantastic day. I think it inspired many people. And I noticed this because on the same day we were approached by Heineken.
I met Marcel at TEDx Amsterdam last year, where he presented his award-winning concept, Ice from the Sky. And I was actually so inspired by, let's say, really cool beer with that. Today, with the workshop with Shell and Heineken, we said we were going to take Ice from the Sky, the basic concept from Marcel, see how can we make it a step further to realization.
The day was just buzzing. Everyone just went for it. There, talking there, and never stopped. So it was just hyper, it was electric. Everyone's just had a ball what we delivered. And to have the way the workshop was done, with people drawing the pictures and visualization, the groups, the dynamics. Yeah, it was wonderful.
On a day like this, where companies work together to realize an idea, we get very excited, because it's all about action, realizing the envisioned impact. And that is also the aim of our program TEDx Worth Doing and TEDx Worth Connecting. Connecting those that can together realize the idea and create the impacts and visions to improve people's lives.
I think we're making history today. 2 big organizations together, working on something that most people would just sort of not give the time of day and think, oh, that's crazy, and all these buts, it wouldn't work, and what about this. We just went for it, conviction, passion, people here were open for it, and together we are doing it. Okay, you see the sort of things you can just do and have a bit of fun, and it is great fun, actually. This is another one. I'm showing this because this is one I'm actually pursuing now. I had a meeting with the founder just literally last week, I think Friday, with the biggest sort of renewable energy company. And that's all that work is. This one is actually being done, I suppose, down the road in Bulgaria, in Sofia. So with the team, I'm actually funding the labs there. And it's a new drilling technology which could potentially drill 30 times faster than you can drill conventionally in hard rock. So this could potentially be, an enabler to open up geothermal energy. Also, looking for funding, we're looking at every way we can. We're also seeing now, and I've got a meeting next week in Sheffield in the UK with nuclear disposal, to drill deep boreholes, so maybe that's a potential outlet. And also, back in Sofia, some companies coming from South Africa who's in the mining area, and maybe they can use it. We can actually drill square holes. So if you've got a reef of gold ore, you can actually drill square or actually brush the rock. So you can think, instead of drilling conventionally holes, leaving 30% down there, we can do things completely differently. So this is where, if it does work in any of those, the impact is absolutely massive, and I'll address that a bit later. So that's just a project ongoing. It started by Shell GameChanger, and then I've managed to just sort of continue that now and keep funding it. And a great buzzing team and really delivering amazingly. This is a typical life in the office for a GameChanger. That's sort of great. I'll show you now. It's to develop a kite system. In fact, if I show you the next slide, It's so simple. In fact, an inventor I'm working with now, it was his design, his idea, that instead of horizontal axis turbines, which need a lot of concrete foundation, fix, got to face the wind, a lot of energy, and even above 1.2 megawatts, the inefficiency goes down. You know, they don't get more efficient the bigger they get because it's to the cube, the materials which are used, etc. And Rembrandt painted windmills in the olden days. So what's really happened? Yes, well, I said they don't even get a bit more efficient. They only get bigger because there's generally a limited area where you can put the wind farms. And whereas this one is a kite, just like an aeroplane wing, traveling, say, at 100 miles an hour, just with a tether really small with your generator, your turbine on ground level where you can maintain it and everything. And by pulling out, it generates the power there. And when the kite's fully extended, it just flies back and a second kite takes over. So you've always got at least 2 kites flying, constant power. It's 5% of the materials that you need compared to traditional. And lots of other advantages. And it works in 0.5 meter a second instead of 5 meters a second. And ideal for offshore. It doesn't need fixed and foundations. So massive advantages. So I took that right through proof of concept, handed it over. You know, I met the inventor at a Bionis Global conference in a little town in Holland called Zeiss. Almost to the day, 6 years ago now. But in that time, we've developed it, proved it. They're just finalizing round A funding for 5 million, and they've had about 5 million invested. About 2 million from GameChanger, then a lot from the DEC government in the UK. But what we've spent to develop that and prove it is less than the cost of one single horizontal axis turbine. So, I mean, the market of this, it could potentially solve Britain's energy requirements with the wind that they've got. So this is what I'm trying to show. Very little investment on these sort of radical ideas. Can you really go wrong? So there's that. And this is just a kind of summary. It's the second to last slide. So as I've mentioned, the second one there, geothermal energy, if that works, you know, how much are we spending? We're now looking for £3 million to really develop the tool to drill 8 kilometers, which is, you can count the wells 8 kilometers deep on your hand, but we think we could do it for 3 million. We could develop all the technology for it. And if you crack that one, you've got almost unlimited CO2 neutral energy anywhere in the world. You know, right below my feet now, if you drill deep enough, there will be the energy, and it can come out at 350 degrees centigrade straight into a turbine generator. So it's everywhere. So if you crack that one, you know, what's the value of that? Likewise, the first one, aeroponics, that is where the roots aren't actually in soil, they're exposed, and you can give a fog which actually goes straight to the roots. You could put the nutrients in that. We can even think it can take RNA now. And then the roots get what they want. They don't need to grow. They don't waste energy. And it's proven. We've done it with potatoes, cabbages, all these sort of crops, but we now want to do it for wheat, barley, and basically we think it could potentially solve world hunger because we should get 20 to 40 times the amount of crops per meter squared that you can conventionally, and for less than 10% of the water. Every bit of the water is used. And you don't even need soil. It can be on rugged hilltops and areas. So, you know, that could really help to solve, you know, as we said, one of the first slides, you know, it was food, water, we're cracking those both, and the energy. And the other two are sort of a shelter. I'm tackling that as well. One is a literally self-pack system. It's all packaged. It goes there and they unfold like a cardboard box, and you've got your accommodation, which can be built locally. And the last one there is maybe solving the housing crisis in London, where space and sites are key. So this one goes above car parks. So in just 3 parking bays wide and then the 2 lengths, 6 bays, you get 2 of these units. So they're for single people or couples without kids, very environmentally friendly in every way. No use screw piles, so no concrete in the ground. You can remove them, very green, and fill a whole car park in 56 hours. So all the latest technologies, vacuum walls, so it's sound and thermal insulated, etc. So, I'm pursuing that one as well. So, You see, it's quite exciting. So, you know, if sort of almost an individual with help from others or whatever can do all of that, what can, say, everyone in this room do, or what can everyone do if we sort of focused, or even a small percentage of our resources into sort of radical or disruptive innovation? And this is kind of what I'm saying. You can drive disruptive innovation within your organization, but you need passion, belief, courage, and determination to turn your ideas into reality and also hopefully create a better world. Okay, thank you.